My name is Sarah Ruth. I'm the outreach coordinator and undergrad advisor for the Latin American Caribbean and Iberian Studies program, and just wanted to give a sort of a general welcome on behalf of our program, and thank you all for coming today. We do have some snacks and coffee and tea in the back, which you're welcome to partake in, and basically that's really all I have to say, so I'll turn it over to dear Mina to introduce our speakers today. Thank you. I'm really happy that this is happening. We never get to share our work, or we very rarely get to share our work, and this is a wonderful opportunity. So before I actually introduce our three speakers, and I will introduce you all three at the same time, and then you will give your papers, and all will be questions for the end. First, I want to give one announcement. That is, right after this, we're having a dissertation proposal writing workshop right here with pizza and people from the Writing Center. So anyone who is interested and wants to stay, you are welcome to stay. So our first speaker is Josh Pope. He's a Ph.D. candidate in applied linguistics in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, the Spanish program. Prior to moving to Madison, Josh completed a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish at Drury University, in Springfield, Missouri, and a Master of Arts at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio. As part of his MA, he spent a year abroad in Alcalá de Henares in Spain, an experience that has helped shape his research interests. His dissertation title is Dialect Acquisition During Study Abroad, Factors that Determine Linguistic Adaptation. That's our linguistics dissertation today. Katie Oswald is also another Chancellor's Fellow, and she specializes in medieval Spanish literature, and she's currently in her final year of her Ph.D. Her research centers on the Spanish epic. She's particularly interested in the roles that orality and writing played in the transmission of epic legends. This is precisely what she studies in her dissertation entitled The Formation and Transmission of the Legend of Bernardo de Carpio. And our third Chancellor Fellow is Daniel Ares Lopez, who's a doctoral candidate in Hispanic Literature and Cultural Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's presently working on a doctoral project focused on the relations between humans and wild animals in the 20th-century Spanish cultural history. His main research interest is the study of 20th-century Iberian literatures and cultures from post-humanist, eco-critical, and socio-environmental approaches. The title of his dissertation is Wildlife, Film, and the Formation of a New Spanish National Nature in Felix Rodríguez de la Fuente, El Hombre y la Tierra, Serie Ibérica, 1975-1981. But please help me welcome our first speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah and Lassies, for organizing this, and Professor De Ferrari for organizing our part on our side over here. My talk today is dialect acquisition during study abroad, some factors that explain linguistic adaptation. As she mentioned, this is part of a much larger project, so you won't get quite the complete picture, but just a little bit. All right, so where is this coming from? There we go. There it's coming from. All right, so a lot of, most of the previous research in language learning and study abroad tends to agree that participants who study abroad gain in communicative and discourse skills such as fluency at a much higher rate than those who do not study abroad, while phonological and morphological or grammatical development tends to not be as consistent in comparing study abroad and at home. Specifically, what I'm going to be looking at today is, or it has to do with that phonological and morphological development, specifically in the development and use of dialect features in Spain. Previous research has mostly centered around the development of the Castilian theta, the interdental sibilant. For orthographic CE, CI, and Z, most research has been quantitative statistical studies showing that very little use of the interdental is used after study abroad. So what I'm going to do is look a little bit more at, qualitatively, at those that do use it and those who do not, and find factors that explain such use or non-use. I'm not going to go really fast through some of the factors given time. One of the factors that I hypothesize will be significant is social network, the composition and type of social network that learners develop while they're abroad. So two primary types of social networks that learners can develop while they're abroad are these here. A lot of learners will gravitate and stay with their U.S. cohort, especially in programs that send a big group over at the same time. This is comfortable for them because studying abroad is daunting for them, and it's comforting to be with people who are in the same experience. Unfortunately, what tends to happen in this type of social network is L1 use, English, in the case of the students that I'm going to be talking about today. This English use can cut off people from the target country and make it hard for language variation in the second language to occur. On the other side, a lot of students may branch out and form social networks with people both in their U.S. cohort and with people in the local country. All right, the ties that they form with these people tend to be temporary or tend to be weak because of the temporary nature of study abroad. These people may use their native language less and their second language more, leading to more variation in their second language. Quite a few studies, including Isabella Garcia, has qualitatively looked at social network and language learning while abroad. And they pretty much agree. Yeah, those who do form the L2 social networks gain the most in, specifically here, oral proficiency ratings. Other studies agree, but there hasn't really been a whole lot of look at social network and dialect acquisition. Some of my previous work, a pilot study, began to indicate that there could be a connection. Two of my participants that used the interdental consistently had quite strong Madrid social networks after spending a year abroad. And two who had fewer contacts also used the interdental either intermittently or almost none at all. What's also important is motivation and intercultural sensitivity to the country that they are in. So let's talk a little bit more about that really quick. All right. Motivation in study abroad. Previous studies have shown that integrative motivation or wanting to become part of the local community can lead to more L2 interaction and oral proficiency gains. Similarly, if students are linguistically motivated, they're going to make linguistic goals for themselves and more L2 contact. And there's also a connection between motivation and actually making the social network itself. And finally, acculturation, or level of intercultural sensitivity. Typically the more acculturated the students are, the more L2 gains and the larger their L2 social network. Right. So that really quickly, leading up to my research questions, do English native speakers acquire dialectal features during study abroad in Madrid, and do they adapt their Spanish accordingly? And what factors at least partially explain the acquisition of the dialectal features? I have 6 participants. There is no time at all to barely even mention all 6 of them today. So I'm going to pick out 2 of them, and I picked the 2 specifically because they have previous experience in other programs. And so that kind of makes a sub-question. All right, how does that previous study abroad experience affect their use of local features in Madrid? So all my participants studied in the Madrid community, and in the spring of 2014 for a full semester. They're all native speakers of American English, Spanish as a second language, university undergraduates with at least a fifth semester grammar and composition course. 5 of them studied in a consortium of 4 large universities at the Universidad Complutense, which they had a variety of coursework. They lived with the host family for a month, followed by apartments with other people. One participant studied in Alcalá de Henares. She was included in this data set because of the geographic and linguistic proximity with Madrid and Alcalá. And she lived with the host family the entire semester. The features that I'm listening for is the distinction between the th and the th, the alveolar and the interdental sibilants, the treatment of the jota in Spain. Specifically, I'm listening for the uvular jota, the pronounced a little bit further back, the jota. That's typical in Madrid. Use of vosotros and other informal second person plural. Through a variety of reading tasks, performed 3 times during the data collection, a role play scenario, and interviews. All right, so just throwing it all out there really quickly, do they use it? Or do they use these features? The interdental, everyone used it at some time during the data collection. All right, some more than others, and we are going to look specifically at Claire and Alexa here in a little bit. The use of the uvular was much less. Courtney used it quite a bit, and Claire just a few times. Vosotros is similar. We just had 2 people who used vosotros after being abroad, and 4 who did not. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna pick out the 2 that had been abroad with other programs before to find their factors, whether or not they used the features or not. Alexa is one who lived with the host family, as I mentioned, and roommates from a variety of countries. Her apartment was admittedly an English zone. She did have a host family that was pretty quiet. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation involved, and a few Spanish friends. She went straight from a program in Buenos Aires to Madrid. In looking at her use of the interdental, I have it circled here. There is 1 at time 2, which was at the end, right at the end of her study abroad, and 1 in time 3, which is 3 months after she returned from Madrid. She had some non-target productions of paz and frecuencia. She did not ever use the uvular jota. She had a couple of velars, which are a couple examples of a non-English huh. Right. She did not ever use anything that's evidence of vosotros. So what does she think about, or why did she not use a whole lot of Madrid features? First, let's think about her opinion on Madrid with Spanish. She said, quote, I like it a lot more than Argentine Spanish. It's just a lot easier to understand for someone that doesn't speak Spanish. She also says, Spain Spanish was just different than what I was used to in Argentina. Regarding the interdental, sometimes I think it sounds funny. And the uvular, I don't have an opinion. And vosotros was just confusing to her, so she didn't really try. I'm purposely using these features, she says, or the interdental. Sometimes I try to do it, but sometimes it doesn't work out. And then she also said that the vosotros was just difficult, so she didn't do it. Interestingly enough with her, she used this term a couple times during the process, not a Spanish speaker. Even though she had spent a full academic year abroad, she did not identify herself as a Spanish speaker. I assume as a learner. Let's look at her social network. If it doesn't have any kind of specification on where the person's from, that person is Madrid or uses Madrid Spanish. All right, so she had a host family that was pretty quiet, didn't really speak a whole lot with her. The coordinators, interaction was business related. She had quite a few friends from the US on her Spanish-speaking social network, but they also spoke in English. And then a few friends that she saw just a few times, including Val and Elena, who she met at the end of the semester in McDonald's bathroom. All right, so, and they met because they were speaking English. There's not a whole lot of motivation or evidence of motivation to form a Spanish social network throughout her interviews. And she didn't want to acquire Madrid Spanish because of her experience in Buenos Aires, which we'll see a little bit more later. She wanted to be in Madrid because of the location and proximity to her sister who was studying in London, and to increase in language. Overall, she had positive evaluations of Spain. If anything negative, it was mixed, like the tranquilo lifestyle. In comparing the programs, in Buenos Aires, she had a really strong bond with her host family. She was also trained to use local linguistic features in class. So that led to her using Argentine Spanish, or Buenos Aires Spanish, quite a bit in her first interview with me. There was seísmo, yo. She used voceo. However, that went away right after she got to Madrid. She formed few bonds in Madrid, and she says, I didn't want to use Madrid Spanish because she was afraid of having a mixed variety. So let's go on to Claire. Time is flying. All right, Claire also was in this program, and she had lived in Central America and Peru before going to Spain. She used the interdental 6 times in interview and role play, twice in time 2 and 4 times in time 3. So both of them after being abroad, like fácil and hacen. She did have one example of a voice, z, aclimatizarme. She used the uvular a whole lot more than she did the interdental at times 2 and 3. I propose that it could have something to do with the fact that she already had a non-English variant in the velar. No vosotros there either. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. When I first got here, I hated Madrid Spanish so much. Later on, it was fun to compare linguistic differences between Argentine and Madrid Spanish, especially with her host mom from a different part. So her opinion of it got better. She said, I kind of tried to use it, not actively tried to pick it up because I don't want my Spanish to be this really ugly mix, even though it's too late for that because of her Central American and Peruvian experiences. She did know that she did the uvular. She attributed it to her Arabic use. And she did use vosotros in certain situations. All right. Really quickly, her social network was pretty much group-oriented in a choir that she joined. She did get to interact quite a bit with them. Everyone else on here is Spanish-English mix, or not really that close. All right. She wanted to be abroad for a full year to gain language immersion. She was socially motivated towards the end. And she was linguistically motivated throughout. Prior to arrival in Madrid, she didn't really know a whole lot about Spain. She had an idea of imperial Spain. And after she spent some time there, she's like, oh, these people are pretty nice. And she did this by studying political science quite a bit in Spain and interacting with the people. All right, so she spent several days in Lima. When she got to Lima, she went a long time without seeing foreigners. She was just with Peruvians. All right, so this led to fewer interactions with English speakers, And this is different than her Madrid program, in which she only saw English speakers in the beginning. When she got to, or after she finished in Madrid, she went back to Peru for the summer, and she experienced readaptation, linguistic readaptation. Very little from, very little Spain Spanish has stuck, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So in conclusion, they were both afraid of mixing their Spanish. They did use some features, some more than others. Factors include social networks, motivation, acculturation, previous experience, etc. Okay, thank you.
But there are two pictures on the handout. So the only thing on the handout are a few passages that I will reference. I'm someone who I like to have the passages in front of me, so it's just for your reference if you'd like it. The two pictures are just one I took when I was in Carpio, Bernardo, and the other is one taken from the website of Bernardo.Carpio.org. So just little views of Bernardo de Carpio. And I'm actually not going to talk about the portraits that's pictured on there at all. Instead, I'm going to talk about Cantares de Gesta that might have existed about this hero. Unlike figures such as the Cid, whose legend in the 13th and 14th centuries survives not only in chronicles but also in epic poems, there's no Cantar de Gesta about Bernardo de Carpio that has been preserved in writing. Instead, the legend is first documented in two Latin chronicles, Lucas de Tuis Chronica Mundi and Rodrigo Jimenez de Rades de Rebus Hispaniae, completed around 1239 and 1243 respectively, and in Alfonso X's Historia de España, composed during the final third of the 13th century. The historical introduction of the Poema de Fernán González from about 1250 also includes a brief account of the hero's deeds, but it only includes one specific episode. The Historia de España's account of Bernardo's tale is the most detailed of these four, including numerous episodes not recorded in the Latin chronicles. When narrating these incidents, the Alphonsine chroniclers tend to reference songs and tales about the hero, which have not been preserved in writing. Although the references to their sources tend to be brief, they do give certain indications regarding the nature of the now lost materials. And in the remainder of this presentation, I will discuss four references to cantares that occur in the Alphonsine Bernardo de Carpio, focusing on what can be deduced regarding the content of the cantar or cantares mentioned, and how such materials were utilized not only by the Alphonsine chroniclers, but also by Lucas de Tuy, Jimenez de Rada, and the author of the Poema de Fernán González. And I'm not the first person to hypothesize what these cantares would have been, but in the past, criticism has been pretty extreme, with one side saying that probably all of the episodes included in the Historia de España would have been part of this big cantar de gesta about Bernardo de Carpio, and the other side saying, well, they only ever reference cantares in the plural, so we can't say anything about a cantar. And I believe that there's a middle ground in there. The Historia de España's account of Bernardo's legend begins with the hero's origins. He is the illegitimate son of San Diaz, Count of Saldaña, and Jimena, sister of King Alfonso II of Leon. After telling that Alfonso, irate, imprisoned the count, the chroniclers reference cantares and fablas about the hero, which reported a second account of his origins. In that account, Bernardo is still the illegitimate son of the Count of Saldaña, but this time his mother is Timbor, the sister of Charlemagne. Throughout his life, Bernardo fights for his monarchs, Alfonso II and Alfonso III of Leon, defeating Charlemagne's troops at Roncesvalles, defeating numerous Muslim armies, and an invading Frenchman, Bueso. He also rebels against his king, particularly against Alfonso III, given the perpetual imprisonment of his father. He's something of a tragic figure. After relinquishing his fortress, El Carpio, in exchange for his father's freedom, he's outraged to find that it is only his father's corpse that's returned to him. Adding insult to injury, Alfonso's response to his grief-stricken vassal is to banish him. Once exiled, Bernardo journeys to the French court, where he is warmly greeted by King Charles, but rejected by his half-brother, so now we're returning to this half-French lineage. He then challenges his half-brother, leaves the court, ravages the surrounding areas, settles in the Pyrenees, marries, and has a son. Throughout the Alphonsine Bernardo, the chroniclers make 4 references to Cantares that would have pertained to Bernardo, and these are the passages found on your handout. 3 of these references deal specifically with his supposed half-French lineage, and the first is when they introduce the account of these origins. En algunos dicen en sus cantares y en sus falas que fue este Bernardo, filho de Doña Timbor, hermana de Carlos, rey de Francia. The second is found during the account of Bernardo's battle with Bueso, a French nobleman, when the chroniclers specified that the invader was Bernardo's cousin. Et dicen algunos en sus cantares, según cuenta la historia, que este francés Bueso, que su primo era de Bernardo. The third, which is actually the last, but it's the third that pertains to this particular theme, occurs when Bernardo greets Charles in the French court after having been exiled by Alfonso. The chroniclers relate, et dicen en los cantares que él dijo allí Bernardo a Carlos, que era sobrino del rey Carlos el Grande, el filho de Doña Timbor, su hermana. The last reference to the cantares, included shortly before Bernardo was exiled by Alfonso, so really it's the third in the chronicle, is different, because it doesn't pertain to his half-French origins. Rather, after Alfonso has granted Sandias' freedom, his vassals discover that the count has already died in prison. As the chroniclers report the king's decision regarding what to do with Sandias' corpse, they reference cantares and romances. Et algunos dicen en sus romances et en sus cantares que el rey, cuando lo supo, que mandó que hiciesen baños, and they give a long description of what the king had them do with the corpse. So I'm going to focus primarily on the references to his half-French lineage, and then we'll return to this final reference. Although we cannot know for certain whether the episodes related to Bernardo's lineage stem from the same cantar, when the 3 are read together, they recount